And so I'm going to start recording. And one of the things that I thought of that I thought might be very helpful was to give you a lot of reminders. And what I tried to do, and if you can just look at them, and if you have a question about any one of them as we go through them, please let me know, because I found several little things that I thought if everybody knew to do these things, it might save some issues later on. But what I want you to do is keep working on your AAPSL if you've not got it finished, and turn it in as soon as you get the different pieces finished. And if I'm not mistaken, unless somebody's turned in something after 4 o'clock today, I am caught up with everything that's been turned in for me to review. And so if there's something that I haven't reviewed and it was turned in before 4 o'clock today, check and see where you posted it, because something, it may not have come to my viewing screen for grading. So what I'd like you to do is actually follow and try to keep caught up with the AAPTEL. And the reason for that is we're already, several people are pretty far behind on the AAPSL. And everybody's at different places. But if we can get the AAPTEL done, it's got 4 tasks. If we can stay up to date with that and get that turned in, then that'll be one piece that's totally behind for everybody. And then those that are still behind, they can get caught up with those others as they go along and have time to work on it. So let's try to do that. Some of you couldn't figure out where you were supposed to put your screenshot for the AAPSL when you gotten the results back from task stream. That's under week 8. So go back to week 8 and that's where it will be. The AAPTEL, some of the things that I'm finding when I reviewed the first few is some of you haven't used information from Todd Whitaker, Linda Darling-Hammond, and Robert Marzano. Dr. Lamb mentioned all of those, so I would encourage you to use them in your lit review. Task 1, and this seems to be a part that people are having problems with too. It's got 2 parts in the checklist. One part of the checklist deals with things you can actually observe in classrooms when you're walking through. So a lot of that information can come from Marzano. It can come from other places that you all have found as well. The second part is dealing with those pieces that are within the school and within the district, and they're not directly related to classroom practices, but they're what kinds of things are teachers doing as in the school or in the district that's showing their leadership or that they feel empowered. And so how are you going to find that information out? Well, you can, if you read the needs assessment information that I think was this week's assignment, you found that there was different ways of doing it, but 2 of the simplest are surveys, where you can get your answers back quickly, and interviews if you can't get enough information from the surveys. So make sure that you look at that as a 2-part checklist. The first part is looking at classroom things you can observe, using the strategies you've researched and you've found. The second part is getting the information that's related to within the school and the school district, and you can't observe most of that. Now, some of it you can. If somebody's a mentor and they're working with teachers on a regular basis, then yes, you've got that information, you can observe that. But some of it you're going to have to get from other people. So if you can observe it, that is wonderful. If you can't observe it, then make sure you figure out a way to get the information. Yes, Lori?
I'm struggling to find some information that's relevant from Todd Whitaker. I've looked on the Gardner Webb site in the library, and I've looked under his name with teacher empowerment. I've looked under teacher leadership, and there's just not a lot that he has on that's coming up.
Todd Whitaker did a lot with what good principals do.
Okay, so that doesn't really have anything to do with what we're doing right now.
Well, indirectly it does. If you're a good principal, you're going to figure out what you can do to get your teachers to feel that they're leaders and be empowered. And so that's where looking at his, and you don't need to include a lot of information from him, but by Dr. Lamb mentioning it, I feel like we need to at least mention it somehow or another. So look at it from a perspective about what a good principal would do to help his teachers become empowered, or her teachers to become empowered and show leadership within the school. You know, a good principal, if they're doing what they should be, they're going to be involving their teachers anyway. They're going to be empowering their teachers to be in the classroom leaders, as well as some department leaders, and working with different committees and groups. So sometimes you have to take the information that you're reading and look at it from a different perspective. Think about,
Okay.
when I'm in this position, what can I do of these good principal qualities to help my teachers?
Well, and what I found is a lot of stuff about different types of teachers, and
Okay.
how to recruit teachers, and how to retain teachers, and and all that kind of stuff.
Under the retention, did you find anything that addresses helping the teachers to feel valued and making decisions and those kinds of things?
No, but I did find a little bit about mentoring
Okay. All right.
there. So it does. So my checklist or my information, I'm not going to get a whole lot from him from the teacher perspective. I'm going to get it from the principal perspective.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That helps, because I was really struggling trying to find anything at all that he had talked about.
A lot of what Todd Whitaker does is works with what principals, and then he wrote a book that I actually had my principals to read several years ago. I don't remember how many, but I think at the time we studied it, it was fairly new. But it's what good principals do, basically different from just mediocre and principals that are not so good. So he's done a lot of research on what a good principal does. So I think that's why Dr. Lamb mentions it, to look at it from the perspective of where you're going, not where you are right now. Okay? All right, any other questions about that? Yes, Lisa?
I'm wondering, with respect to a survey, would we put a template in with the checklist, and then maybe if we send out a survey to those teachers, then include that somewhere, like in an appendix for the paper?
All right, if you put it in as a second part of gaining information, and make sure that you put the checklist is the observable things. And then your second part is information related to the other pieces that are not observable, and you have to go back and look at the topic and figure out how to label it. But where it would come into play would be you create it in the first one. Where it comes into play is when you're looking at your gap analysis. So that gives you time to do the survey, because you have to you're supposed to do the observations for 5 days. And so it gives you time to do the 5 days of observations, and that gives you 5 days to also get the information back through surveys or interviews or whatever.
Okay.
So it shows up. Your first document just shows what you're looking for. Your second document shows the gaps, or your second task is where you actually analyze what you saw. And then what you're in the gap, you're looking at what what the good quality research says is supposed to be happening in the classrooms and in the schools to encourage empowerment and leadership in those areas. And then the second part is what's actually happening, and you were to show where the gaps are. What is it that's happening that this is not happening in my school, but it's the best practice. So it's where your gaps are showing up. Okay?
Thank you.
Lori?
So just the timing wise, you know, I had submitted my paper and I had done the checklists not correct, so I'm having to fix those. And then I'm waiting on my peers to do it. So I don't see how by the time I fix everything, I'm not going to have 5 days this week
Right.
to observe somebody. And so that's going to automatically put me behind because my checklist wasn't quite what it needed to be. So I'm trying to tweak it, but do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. And one of the things I want you to think about is I don't want you to post your final document until you've made all your revisions. You can go ahead and even if it's off a little bit, it won't be as far along as you are and as well as you're caught up. You're not going to be behind very much. The most you'd be would be 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
So, you know, if you need to use a little bit of time for the next week before the next document is to be turned in, that's fine.
Okay, because I was worried about getting it in on Sunday because I haven't quite finalized my checklist yet.
No, go ahead and don't worry about that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Other questions about that? All right. So we talked about the 2 parts. Task 2 is where you use the information from your observation surveys and compare them to what the research says you're supposed to be doing. And you're looking for your gaps. And then you're to discuss the gaps in the 5 areas that were identified in prompt 1 in narrative form. And don't forget, you are always to use APA, and you're to reference your resources that you identified in your lit review. Then once you identify your gaps, that's where you create your needs assessment. And then you are to graphically represent the data you discussed in your narrative. And the data is to be in the form of charts, tables, graphs, and those kinds of things. Now, what I have done is I have went back and took task 1 and task 2 and tried to make this is what you need to be doing and just bullet it so that we could have it all in the order that it needs to be. The visuals that you use are to illustrate and support your data analysis and conclusions that you find in your needs assessment based on the gap analysis. One of the things I'm finding is sometimes the Zoom conferences are posted in the wrong place. And so there are 3 that you've done other than that very first one. You've done a Zoom conference where you discuss the AAPSL task 1 and 2 in your group. You've done a Zoom conference discussing the case study 1. And then you're working on your group Zoom conference for the AAPTEL task 1. And then those are the only 3 you've had so far. So just make sure you look at the headings enough that you're placing the right ones in the right places. That's one of the things that I'm finding. All right, the next part comes from task stream. Is talking about task stream. Some of you are fortunate enough that you've already finished it and you've got your scores back. And that is absolutely wonderful. If you make a 3 or above, then you don't do anything. You move on. Now there is an exception to that. If any one of the areas is below a 3, on any one of the little parts, if it's below a 3, you may have a 3.6 or a 3.4. But if any one of those is below a 3, you have to redo that one and submit it. So the evaluator will send you a message that says something similar to revise and resubmit. They're also supposed to put the comments that show exactly what you need to do so that you can go back and find the section that deals with the problem. So if you don't have the whole picture, then you don't realize what's going on, because one of the students contacted me and let me know that she had seen a score and it showed 3.6, but the evaluator had sent it back to her. Well, initially that did not make any sense to me. But what I learned, and this is something you all need to be aware of too, I don't have access to task stream for for me to be able to see your scores. Dr. Tillman does. So I'm having to rely on her whenever there's these questions that come up. And so she was able to go in and look, and she said, oh, this one section has a 2. As soon as she told me that, I knew what the issue was. That one section had to be redone because of the fact that it was not up to a 3. So you have to have 3 on every piece of the evaluation. It's not just the whole thing. So, you know, if you get the message to redo it, check and see what it's talking about and redo just that section, and you should have to not have to do anything other than that one little section. Now, the next couple of things I put was to remember your annotated bibliography for the AAPSL needs to be in the document. And because of the information that we learned about that, if your rubric says something about an action plan and it's in the rubric, I would also include the action plan in the document. And that way, they can't send it back to you because they want it in a different place. You will have it there. So, and that's just to be on the safe side. I think that will make sure that things go real smoothly. Another thing is when you're posting a YouTube video, most of the time I can open them, but occasionally I will get one and it will have a black screen, a circle, a big exclamation point, and nothing, you know, and then a cross over it. My guess is whoever recorded it and saved it did not make it public or unlisted. If you leave it as a private one, no one can view it except yourself. If you make it unlisted, anybody who you share the link with can open it. If you make it public, anybody can open it, even if they're just researching and they run across it. But it doesn't matter whether it's unlisted or public, but it needs to be one of those two. And I already mentioned that if your rubric mentions an action plan or an annotated bibliography for a specific task, include that in the main part of the document rather than putting it in the appendix. All right, now that I went over all of those reminders, those are things that I've run across that various people have had questions about, and I just thought it might be easier for everybody if I just put them all in one place. Do y'all have any additional questions that's not related to any of those things? No additional questions? Lori?
Sorry, I did have a quick question about peer reviews. So we had ours divided up because there's 5 in our group, and the one of the members that I was supposed to peer review for task 3 still hasn't posted task 3. So my peer review isn't done because of that. Do I just keep waiting and do it then, or
just keep? You need to have 2. If we find out that somebody's going to either get an incomplete and they're not going to try to get it finished within this semester, then substitute another one and go ahead and do one so you'll have your 2.
So even if they've already submitted it, just go ahead and do one?
Oh, you think this person's already submitted it?
No. What I'm saying is my other people have already submitted. And so I don't really need to do task 3 for them because they're finished with it.
Yeah, but you need 2. So I would wait till I talk to that person, because it should be in your group, and find out what their intent is.
Okay.
After last week's meeting, we had several people who contacted us and said that they knew they were behind, and I'll back that up. It wasn't several, it was 1 or 2. that said they knew they were behind, but they really were going to work hard to try to get caught up because they wanted to go ahead and get this semester out of the way. So I'm hoping that that is what they're going to do.
Okay, so just keep watching for it.
Just keep watching for it. When it gets up to like the very last week or so, or maybe 2 weeks before, then just go ahead and do one so you will have done 2. And that way you get the full points.
Okay,
I don't know any other way to do it other than that. Any other questions? That's a really good question, too. Any other questions? By the way, the work that y'all are turning in is really good. And don't take it that we think that it's not good. It is good, but we're just trying to use what we know about. And sometimes things change and we're not aware of it until just when it goes into the evaluators and we realize what's going on. And that was what happened with the annotated bibliography. We didn't realize that there had been a change in focus when, because in the past it had never mattered where it was as long as it was there. And so, you know, when these things happen, we try to fix it and get the rest of you to where maybe it won't happen again, but I'm not promising that. You know, as with online programs and with as many of us who are teaching it, I attend the faculty meetings that Dr. Lamb has, and so does Dr. Tillman, but still from time to time, by us being in different places, we don't all get all the same information. All right, any other questions before we move on? I want to introduce tonight task 3 of the AAPTEL. So are there any other questions so far? Okay. All right, for the growth plan, think of it sort of like an action plan. This has just got a different focus. It's what you're to do is some of the same things that you've done before. Is you're to assemble and lead a team of your colleagues, and you're to develop a teacher empowerment leadership growth plan. You're going to share this with your school improvement team and or your school administration. Now, depending on how you feel about which one you'd rather present it to, it doesn't matter who you present it to. You can present it to one of the school administrators or their administrative team, or you can present it to your school leadership team. Your administrators, if you present it to them first, they may say, I want you to share this with your whole school improvement team. So it just has to be presented to someone. Now, what you're to include in this growth plan is a report of best practices, a visual checklist, a gap analysis, and a growth plan. So what does that all sound like? It sounds like a lot of the stuff you've already done. So you're taking the work that you've done and you're putting it in one document and you're getting it together to present it to your school administration or your school improvement team. In the plan that you put together, I would put a narrative with the summary of the information from those areas prior to creating the actual growth plan. You don't have to include all those pieces in this particular one. You just need some kind of information from each one of them so that in your presentation that you're going to give, that you'll have your data and you'll have your information that about what research says, and you'll show the gaps where your school is, and that's what you're doing with that. Lori?
When it says a team of colleagues, does it have to be all teachers?
No. A team of colleagues can be who, if some of your all's PLCs have administrators in them. Mm-hmm. Some of them have various members of the faculty together. So it's just whatever you have chosen, and it can be your PLC group from the first AAPSL. You know, it doesn't have to.
Yeah, my PLC group for the first one though wouldn't really work.
Okay.
For this.
All right.
So, but I was wondering if I could, like, our lead teacher and one of my assistant principals, the three of us work together a lot on this kind of stuff, and so I was wondering if they could be my PLC.
That could be your team.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. That's a good question. Any other questions from anyone? All right. So as you prepare this task, you are to create an analytical narrative that describes the process of assembling your team, and you're to develop and present a teacher empowerment and leadership professional growth plan. You're to use the resources and data that you collected in the first two tasks. You're also to utilize multiple digital, graphic, and presentation tools to create a report that includes the following: a report of best practices, a visual checklist, a gap analysis, and a growth plan. Now, it also tells you exactly what is to be in the growth plan. It's a vision for positive school environment. It's documentation that supports the needs you've identified. You're looking for a list of strategic indicators for success. Don't forget to break this next part down. Specific short-term and long-term goals and objectives. They're looking for both of those. And go back and double check, because sometimes they also want mid-term goals, but I think this one just says short-term and long-term. Activities that will address your identified goals and objectives. So what is it you need to be doing to improve in the areas that you've got weaknesses? A plan that you're going to communicate progress with the vital stakeholders. You're to also have a specific timeline of the activities. You're to have a plan for stakeholder involvement and buy-in. You're to have specific roles and responsibilities for the action plan. And then you're to have formative and summative assessment criteria. Now, some of those things, probably each of those things, you're going to want to do a narrative under that heading before you try to put the whole thing together as a growth plan. Similar to what you did with your action plan in the AAPSL. So you're going to make sure you cover each one of those sections. Make sure you have a subheading that will let your evaluators find the information quickly. And so then you will want the growth plan at the bottom of that, but within the document. All right, to be proficient, the rubric says that you're to have the following: opportunities for teachers and staff to assume leadership and decision-making roles, your strategies for building efficacy, your structures for implementing effective PLCs, your support and coaching of emerging school leaders, methods for formal feedback for your teachers, and multiple uses of digital tools and/or technology. And to be accomplished, the biggest thing that's added to that is you have to have a video record of your presentation addressing the prioritized needs developed in the prompt for task 3. So if you want to be considered for the accomplished, you're going to do a video recording of where you present it either to your principals or to your school improvement team. And you're also going to have the prioritized needs. You're going to make sure you cover that. So those are the main things of task 3. And some of you are still working on task 1 and 2, which is fine. Some of you are ready to go ahead and begin working on task 3. So that's basically the amount of things I wanted to cover tonight. Do you have any other questions or anything else you want us to talk about? This will be really our shortest one we've ever had, I think. But if there's not any questions, do you have any questions or concerns or thoughts? Okay. If you all are fine with the information and you don't have any questions, then I will end the meeting. And if you have any questions or anything, please contact me. Send me an email anytime. It's fine to call me on my cell phone. If you do call me and I don't answer, because a lot of times I go to the Y of a morning and I don't take my phone in because they don't want the classes that I take interrupted by phone calls. leave me a message and I'll call you back just as soon as I can get there. So even though I'm retired and working part-time as an adjunct, I still go to class at the Y, but it's for my personal health more so than anything else. Any questions at all? Okay. Well, you have a great rest of the week. And Nashila, were you asking a question or just waving to somebody? Okay. All right. Y'all have a great rest of the week and enjoy your time. And I hope the weather is pretty. It's supposed to get cold though. So have a good week and I'll see you maybe next week. Bye.